now, before we get into this breakdown and review of the Andor Season 2 finale, spoilers. Star Wars fans, scrap that. Fans of masterful storytelling from top to bottom on the small screen, I believe Andor Season 2 just delivered what could be described as one of the greatest seasons of sci-fi drama television to ever be piped into humans' homes. The finale arc, while maybe not as emotionally exhausting as the Gorman arc, but definitely loaded with quality narratives, managed to accomplish what many franchises always seem to fail at, and that is providing a satisfying and mostly fully complete understanding of all the character and major world-building plot threads that were started and massaged over the course of its full run. I believe the only Andor arc not fully buttoned up by the end of the Season 2 finale was Cassian's sister, which at least got a dream sequence, so even then it's hard to complain about achieving 99.99% narrative completion for a show set in one of the most expansive pop culture brands of all time. Episodes 10 through 12, like all the others before them this season, showcased pristine craftsmanship from all areas of the production. The pacing, score, acting, character and world building, and action moments were all top tier. Tony and his team of creatives have undoubtedly produced some of the best non-fantasy based Star Wars of all time, and you'd be hard-pressed to convince me it's not in the top 5 of overall best live-action Star Wars anything. The finale proved it was that fantastic and Star Wars lore-rich of a series, so I don't really want to hear about Disney Star Wars slop from that crowd on this one. There are no holes to poke in this finale. We got a meaningful backstory for Luthen and Kleya explaining their relationship and how they became the team to jumpstart the rebellion against the Empire. It added all sorts of new layers to both characters and helped fans to hopefully recognize Luthen's role in the formation of the Alliance and how he was viewed as an outcast by the leaders on Yavin, while also showcasing how damn impressive Kleya is as a lifelong rebel operative. These two really are the founders of the force that takes down Palpatine and ROTJ, so I appreciated getting to learn more about their past and their motivations to do what they did. Luthen's Season 1 speech should really resonate now with this kind of lore being explained, and while many of us thought everyone in Andor that was not in Rogue One had to die, I did appreciate Kleya making it and becoming a member of the Alliance on Yavin. It allows us to dream up whatever else she may have did to help the rebels and herself make it to the end of the Empire's reign. This finale also brought closure to Dedra, who we learned has been essentially spying on Krennic to find information on Axis, which landed her in what appears to be the prison on Narkina 5 after she failed to take in Luthen on her own, which is more than likely due to her obsession with him that started way back in Season 1. So again, the theme of this review is how much closure the finale brought. We got to see some amazing exchanges between Cassian and K2, and even Melshi, which will only make Rogue One feel more fleshed out and meaty in terms of character bonds and interactions. As promised by Lord Gilroy himself, we also literally got to see Cassian gearing up and heading off to the mission we first met him on in Rogue One. More importantly though, we were treated to exactly what was being said to him about Luthen, his intel on the Death Star, and how he was initially treated by the Council over the information's validity. You could see how distrustful the Alliance leaders were of Luthen due to his years of secrecy and working alone, which again will just add more context and narrative weight to Cassian's mission in Rogue One. The new Death Star lore in particular may be the most rich aspect of the finale's narrative though. I absolutely love retro lore that informs stories that came before it, so learning new details on how the rebels actually got wind of the Empire's superweapon was a huge cherry on top of this Star Wars sundae of awesomeness. We now know that Dedra is ultimately the main Imperial responsible for allowing details of the Death Star to get leaked to the rebel movement. She was scavenging intel meant only for Krennic's team that informed her of happenings on Scarif, the Gorman mining's true purpose, why the Empire needed Kyber from Jedha, and that Galen Erso was the engineer involved in it all. While she didn't do it herself, it was revealed that Lonnie Young, Luthen's ISB agent, stole her access card and dug into her files to find all of this information about Palpatine's energy project just being a cover for a superweapon. Jung then nuked his cover to tell Luthen, who in turn murders him to tie up loose ends and possibly provide cover for Jung's family. From here, Luthen conveys the Death Star-related intel to Kleya, who then tells Cassian, who then explains it all to the Council. The Council doesn't believe it due to their mistrust of Luthen, the guy responsible for their alliance in the first place. Screw you, Bale and the other 2 senators. So they ground Andor, after learning that one of his Saw contacts, Tivik, will only talk to him about something big he learned on Jedha. Then the Council greenlights Cassian going to Kafrene to meet Tivik, which we see take place in Rogue One. Tivik then tells Cassian about a defected Imperial pilot who explains that the Empire is working on a massive battle station and that Galen Erso is the key to taking it out. This leads the rebels to kidnapping Galen Erso, who learns from her dad that he built an exploit into the Death Star's exhaust port, which leads to the Scarif mission and getting the plans to Leia, which then leads to her farm boy brother blowing up the Death Star. I just love how fans got so much more insights into how the rebellion secured the intel about the Death Star, knowing what it leads to over the course of Rogue One and A New Hope. To close out my review of this finale, I have to comment on the Bix and Baby scene, which I called last week on the Star Wars Time show, by the way, so feel free to mail those trophies my way. Anyway, I found this ending to be very emotional on all levels. On one hand, it was very sad to learn Cassian had a baby that he'd never meet, but on the other, there was an air of hope knowing that what Cassian is embarking on will one day bring peace to Bix and their child, not to mention that B2, his OG droid friend, also ended up in a good place. Then you had the parallels between the end of Rogue One and the end of Andor, with Bix looking hopefully out to the horizon, clutching her child, reminding you of Cassian and Jyn embracing and looking towards the horizon as they awaited their deaths. Just beautiful imagery to close this series out. We truly were given a direct lead-in prequel to Rogue One and A New Hope with this Andor S2 finale arc, and both of those films will now be fundamentally different to watch, knowing more of the backstory of the rebellion and those who sacrificed everything for the cause, allowing the Skywalker twins and their pals to pull off the unthinkable just a few years after the events of this show. Alright, top moments time. There were so many in this arc, but I'll lead with the Dedra and Luthen showdown in his shop. It was loaded with tension and doublespeak by these 2 master spies, and it felt like watching a dance between enemies. I loved how no music was used in the scene, but the tension remained peak due to how calm both were probing each other. Then you got another brilliant round of dialogue from Luthen when he tells Dedra she's too late by explaining, "The rebellion isn't here anymore. It flew away. It's everywhere now. There's a whole galaxy out there waiting to disgust you." So damn good. Then of course he seppukus himself to round out this memorable scene. I also have to highlight episode 10's excellent and very efficient telling of Luthen and Kleya's past and why they have always seemed to be related in some capacity. It didn't take any time at all to perfectly explain the motivations of both Luthen and Kleya thanks to these flashbacks, and it felt like we learned a season's worth of lore about them, showcasing how well done the callback scenes were. Then their journey is all tied together and ended in sad fashion with Kleya ensuring Luthen would never be tortured for his knowledge. Next up, I have Krennic interrogating Dedra. I loved this moment, not only because it gave us deeper understanding of how the Death Star project leaked, but more so for how well it showcases why the Empire failed. These two were essentially working against each other for the past few years because the Empire was so secret and would not share key intel across divisions. This then led to infighting and power plays by key Imperial leaders, which ultimately led to the rebels getting the biggest gift they could hope for. So I loved seeing these two ensure the Death Star and the Empire would never be as deadly as they could have been on paper. Kleya really did steal this arc, and her scene with Cassian in the safe house is one of her best. I mostly appreciated this heated exchange because it helped to paint a better picture as to just how big of an outcast Luthen was to the Alliance, but also how he was the key and they owe him some form of respect. You could feel the hurt in Kleya's soul knowing that her de facto dad, who gave everything and more to a cause that now looks at him as a paranoid lunatic who is not to be trusted, regardless of his past contributions to the rebel cause. How about the Kleya rescue ultimately by K2, even though Cassian and Melshi were present as well? Watching K2 donkey punch and kick his way to the safe house was a visual treat. I mean, how freaking hardcore was it to see him using Hirt as a literal meat shield? After all the chaos, he then casually says, "I've cleared a path," like a proud son telling his dad he's done helping him with some yard work. It was a very visceral, intense scene and one of the best action beats of the season. There was a concerted effort in this arc to make it clear that the Alliance leaders like Bail, Senators Jabel and Palmo, Radis and Draven had no love or even a modicum of respect for Luthen Rael and what he did for them all in the Alliance. So I also appreciated when Cassian laid into the Council a bit. Even with him and Luthen being separated for over 2 years at this point, he knew how important Luthen was and that his final intel drop should be heeded immediately and trusted. So I really enjoyed seeing him get worked up over the Council's utter disdain and mistrust for anything Luthen, the true grandfather of their alliance. Finally, I found the closing few minutes of episode 12 to be end of series perfection, as well as the ideal lead-in for Rogue One. The music was spot on as the camera cut to all the remaining players from Andor and those who step up in Rogue One to show us what they were up to soon before they scored their first major victory at the Battle of Yavin. You got to see Cassian in his Rogue One opening fit, Mon and Vel together, Kleya looking hopefully at Melshi training the likes of Pow in the jungle. There was Dedra crying in the prison and Krennic marveling at his creation. How about Perrin ending up with Skaldun's wife? And of course, the B2 Bix and Baby reveal. I really don't think this series could have ended any better. Okay, eggs and references time. This looks like Han's blaster model, doesn't it? We get the first Galen Erso reference from Luthen while he relates the intel to Kleya. Luthen uses a Nautilon bleeder to kill himself, which is a relic from the Nautilons, aka Kit Fisto's species. In a flashback, Luthen is selling a Devonian victory necklace, which is from a planet first featured in the Clone Wars. Luthen and young Kleya pull off their first major act of insurrection on Naboo at some cafe that feels very close to Padme's lake house retreat. The hospital Luthen is taken to is called the Lina So Hospital, who was Chancellor during the High Republic. I think Dedra saying Death Star is the first time we've heard those words in Andor. Anyone? Hey, a Treadwell droid. We also got to see Blue Squadron X-Wings a few times on Yavin, which is good because we won't ever see them again after the Battle of Scarif. K2 reminisces about his Empire Day parade march in front of Palpatine. We get to see Radis again, but he also drops a line about Merrick, who is Antok Merrick, the leader of Blue Squadron from Rogue One. Here is the Rebel Council in their Rogue One fits and appearances. You have Organa, Mothma, Jabel, Palmo, Radis, and Draven, and they're all talking about Jedha and Saul, so a loaded references scene. Leo Partagaz was listening to Nemec's manifesto from Season 1, which apparently is now a galaxy-wide mantra that clearly scares the man. Cassian mentions Tivik, his Saul contact, who is the guy he shoots to kick off Rogue One on Kafrene. Bail gives us what I believe is the one and only May the Force be with you drops in all of Andor. Cassian in his Rogue One opening kit. Melshi is taking Pow from Rogue One and other rebels on a jungle run. Dedra appears to be in Narkina 5, the same prison Cassian was locked up in to make Death Star parts in Season 1. So it's beautifully ironic that someone who loved having control is now being ultimately controlled, and she has to spend her days making parts for the Death Star that ended up getting her thrown in prison in the first place. Bix looking to the horizon with her child is a parallel to Cassian and Jyn doing the same at the end of Rogue One. If you stuck around for the end credits, then you were treated to some John Williams love as his classic Star Wars theme kicked in to really hammer home the Andor series finale as being a direct prequel to both Rogue One and A New Hope. Man, it's a shame Andor is over already, knowing how damn amazing it all was and how competent it was at fleshing out some key lore to add more weight to everything we see in Rogue One and the OT. It didn't rely on big-name characters or the fantastical aspects of Star Wars that fans salivate for, which to me makes it an even more impressive entry in the Star Wars canon than anything else. It showed that it takes much, much more than super-powered legends to thwart an evil empire. In fact, it proved that without everyday people willing to do heroic things that ask them to sacrifice everything, evil can never be fully defeated. And I think that's a message the world needs more now than ever. Thank you, Tony and team. May the Force be with you for what you have given us die-hard Star Wars fans. Hey, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Leave a comment, share it around, possibly become a channel member because there's always time for Star Wars time. And if you're down with our content, then the Force will be with you. Always.